Hi, Tony. Hi, everyone. Hope you guys can hear me well. I just wanted to say that let's wait a few minutes until the other attendees are coming. I see a few people already here. Today is going to be a super exciting session and very relevant as well because the granting season has just started. We have the Horizon Europe and other grants are opening as well, but I don't want to say too much about it because that's the reason why we have Tony here today. Hi, Tony. I'm not too sure whether you can hear me.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, I cannot
Great.
see. I just said,
Good afternoon.
let's wait a few minutes until the other attendees arrive, and then we can start around 5, so 2:05, if it is okay with everyone.
Okay.
Okay, well, it's nearly 05, so I think we can start and let's wait until the others come. It's a Friday afternoon for everyone, I believe, but usually the turnover is not that bad. So plus this week meeting is already being recorded, and we will advertise this on our YouTube channel. I mean the YouTube channel of the program. My name is Gergely Gulyás. I'm the moderator today, but I think you guys already know me. And actually, I would like to introduce you our grant expert, Tony Lesowiec. Sorry if I couldn't pronounce your name very well. And basically, actually, I would allow you to just introduce yourself and then kick off, start the webinar. You are muted, by the way. Sorry, I muted you because there was some background.
Okay. 1 moment. Hello, can everybody hear me and see me?
Yep, we can. I mean, the attendees cannot really ask questions, only if they do it in the chat.
Okay.
But yeah, well, if you want, I can add the teams in the meantime. So and if you guys have a question, just please message me and I can read it out loud. So
Sounds good. Are people going to do introduction first, or do you want me to start the presentation? How do you?
I think an intro would be nice. I mean, if you could just introduce yourself, what you do, what
Yes.
yeah, because I know that you are a very well skilled person to do this webinar, and I think that's very important as well, and also the main points in terms of how to win grant applications and how to find good and relevant grants. I think that's super exciting.
Okay, thank you. So I've jumped forward to, I think, my slide number 3 about my quick introduction. So very briefly, so first of all, thank you for everybody's time this afternoon. Appreciate Friday afternoon is sometimes a time when people want to switch off for the weekend, but thank you for your attention and support. As a quick introduction, my background is in chemistry. So this is how I started life. I used to work in the health sector, a big global company, 3M Healthcare. I'm sure everybody will know. I worked in the oil lubricant sector for many years as a chemist. I then worked for a research and technology organization called Civitta Innovation in the UK. The company doesn't exist anymore, but I worked there a long time and I started to work on R&D projects, participating in R&D projects, managing R&D projects, writing grant proposals, and then I got into the commercial world, selling access to R&D funding. I also then had a part-time job at the University of Sheffield in the UK. I'm not an academic, but I've helped academics access grants. That was my role there. And then after so many years of experience, I thought this is the time to take more ownership and control of my destiny and the work that I do. But I've been accessing grants since 1995, so about 26 years. With colleagues, I've accessed about 250 mil in grant funding. And essentially, I have 3 skill sets. I understand a broad range of technologies. Equally, I understand the business commercial world very well. And actually, the bit that brings it together is doing grant writing, because when you write grants, you have to write about the R&D, the science, and you have to write the commercial aspects too, making a commercial impact. I'm also an EU coach on the Horizon Europe programme. So when SMEs get allocated grants, they want a seasoned business head to steer the project, not only technically, but commercially. And I'm also involved in assessing grants for UK government agencies as well. So that's my very quick introduction. I'm resident in the UK. I have an office in London, but I'm based most of the time in my home, which is in the East Midlands in the UK. If anybody can't hear me or I'm talking too fast, please tell me, and I will revisit any points. Okay, so.
Actually, I mean, maybe I can allow the attendees to talk as well, because we don't really have a high number of turnover as yet, but maybe later on we will. But we have the teams here who are participating in this program. So actually, just allow you guys to talk, so you can even ask questions from Tony as well. I think it would be pretty useful for everyone. So yeah. Yes. Yeah, I just clicked on it. So yeah, if you cannot hear or understand something, just you have the opportunity to unmute yourself and talk. It's fine.
And that would be good. So please feel free to make this interactive. No problem with any interruption with questions while I talk. Just let me know, and I'll pause and I'll answer your question. Okay. Okay, so I'll keep moving forward, if that's okay. I can see some names on the right-hand side, so I can see people's names here. But I'm going to try and do this in 2 parts. I'm going to keep this very high level. I'm going to talk about grant funding and even the background to the grant funding, and why governments are very keen to offer grants to organisations. I'm going to give an overview of Horizon Europe. It's so broad, but I'll give you a top level overview, and then we can always, I can signpost you to where to get more information. And I'm going to show you how to navigate around the portal to search for very specific funding opportunities. And then I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking around some of the basics about how to write very good grants. And often it goes beyond answering the questions. You know, there is a process to winning grants. A lot of information that I will give to you, you can research anyway on the internet and through the funding websites. But I'll help to give you a broader understanding. Okay. Right, I'll keep moving. So I've done my introduction. The purpose of today really is to help to empower you with knowledge on how you can access grants, the right grants, so you can be successful as individuals in your organizations and for your personal professions, and then equally for your organizations that you represent. So if you win grant funding, it's good for you, it's good for the organization that you work with. And I do this as a purpose. That is the purpose of today. And if this is wrong, then I'm going off at a tangent. But hopefully it's giving you some tools and guidance about how to access funding. Okay. Okay, so we'll keep moving. Here we go. So the background to funding. I think it's important to start off at the beginning a little bit, because there's a reason why governments give grant funding. Historically, companies in the 1960s, in the 1970s, even in the 1980s, they used to compete on quality. We're going to make it a high quality, ISO 9001 standards. We're going to compete on cost. We're going to try and bring the cost down, and delivery. And that can mean customer service. We're going to look after the clients and the people that we're working with. We're going to compete on cost, and we're going to give you quality. Now, today, quality cost delivery is not enough. You need to do more than that. Often you can buy goods from the Far East, China, that make phenomenal mobile phones for maybe 10, 15 euros. They work well, so it's got quality, it competes on quality, it competes on cost, and they give you good customer service. It's not enough. So how do companies compete? Does anybody want to offer an answer?
Again, guys, you can unmute yourself and ask questions, and make it more interactive. So don't be shy. That's a good opportunity to ask. So I can encourage everybody to do it.
Yeah, if it works. Okay, so companies need to compete on innovation. That's the way to compete, because quality cost delivery, it's not enough. You will not compete on that alone. If you drive your prices down, then you're not going to make any profits, and the company will die eventually. So you need to innovate. Now, I just want to talk about what innovation is. Sometimes people think, when I ask them what is innovation, they'll say, oh, it's something new, it's something novel, it's something unique. It's all of those things, but there's still one element missing. I don't know if anybody can guess that, or feel free to suggest what that might be in the chat box. Okay. So the key word that makes something innovative, it must have a commercial end game, a commercial endpoint. If you're developing some clever science without, just for the sake of creating science, without a commercial endpoint, it is not innovation. A lot of the innovation I'll be talking about this afternoon, and where there is funding opportunities, it's around innovation. And if I can define innovation in one simple line, it's taking an idea and it's turning it into money or saving money. So think of innovation like that. And this is where R&D grant funding can help. A lot of organizations, particularly SMEs, they often have the very best science and technology ideas. The cutting edge, brilliant ideas do not come from the big global companies. Mostly, they come from SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises. But those companies often have challenges. I've got a great idea, but I don't have the time. I don't have the money to spend €1 or €2 or €5 million on a fantastic research project. I just don't have that money. I don't have the resources, the capabilities, the laboratories. I don't have access to the best scientists, engineers. I don't have a direct route to market. So these are very common barriers to very clever, innovative SMEs with great ideas, but they can't take it forward. And this is where funding bodies like Horizon Europe can say to an SME, small, medium-sized enterprise, convince me you've got a fantastic idea and we will pay for that work to be done for you and with you. So it'll de-risk the work that you will do. You can work as a team. Often with EU funding, you have to work with at least 3 member states in a supply chain relationship. So that partnership will help you to establish market presence, credibility, and give you access to those needed resources. And then going on to what Horizon Europe is, well, the fantastic news is EU participants, including the UK with Brexit and associate countries, are all contributing into this budget, which is the biggest in funding history. So it's not far from €100 billion over 7 years. That is by far the biggest opportunity. So that is fantastic news. And you can get funding for almost any areas of science, apart from areas of mass destruction, pretty much, and at almost any level. So if it's an early stage or final stage. So that is great news. But it's competitive, like all good things. And this is where you need to be smart about how to access the money. But that money is there from the taxpayers, EU taxpayers, to make the EU more competitive. So we can create jobs, wealth, and increase societal benefits, well-being, fight disease, hunger, famine, climate change, all the big issues. So they want to see impact from this area, from the funding. Okay, I'll keep, just one minute. Right, so next slide. So essentially in Horizon Europe, there are 3 main pillars. And I'll go into these in a little bit more detail. So this 96 billion is split mainly between these 3 pillars, pillar 1, 2, and 3, as you can hopefully see on the slide. Pillar 1 is it's more focused about developing people, individuals, clever researchers. So specifically, European Research Council. These are grants often that go to researchers in universities or research institutes. They are highly prestigious, highly paid over 3 or 4 years to do some real cutting edge science. So this is really fundamental early stage science. So this is more about developing people. The second one is Mary Skłodowski-Curie. These are in effect like fellowships where individuals, early stage researchers can apply for a fellowship where they will often go to another country and work with another university and business to develop them. And it's highly prestigious, but both are, and highly competitive. And research infrastructures are more about connecting people and research communities in different, so for example, if there's lots of different fragmented research activities in medicine, fighting COVID, this is about trying to connect these different communities so they share knowledge. So we're not repeating lots of repetitive work that's already been being addressed and investigated. Pillar 2 is where there is funding for science and health. And you can see 6 bullet points where they're looking to say, well, we've prioritized health, cultural society aspects, security, digital technologies, climate, food, environmental resources. These are very hot, big global topics, and the EU have said through their working committees, these are the areas that we want to prioritize for funding. And there are a number of specific funding programs under these pillars. The third pillar is a little bit fragmented. The number one box in the third pillar is called European Innovation Council. And that is to do with providing funding for particularly SMEs who have got a technology in any sector, but it's developed to a middle level, if you like, and they want to then upscale it and commercialize it. So European Innovation Council funding, which I'll go into in a bit more detail, it's all about optimizing, upscaling, rolling out commercially. It's not about doing fundamental research. We've done the research and now we're doing the development. And the other two boxes are really around networking again, around, well, specifically around ecosystems, environmental, connecting communities, and the third one around technology research bodies with areas of common research. I don't want to go into too much detail of this because you can very easily type those words into Google and you can read much more about it. The purpose of this slide is to show you how everything hangs together under the big banner of Horizon Europe. So I've mentioned about Pillar 1 at a high level. It's all about developing people. In Pillar 2 is where health sits. I understand from this webinar, there is probably maybe a bias towards interest in funding in health projects. So we'll come on to that in a bit more detail as well. So within the health, I won't read everything out here, but the EU have prescribed a number of areas that they are particularly keen to fund in those 6 bullet points at the bottom. So general health, fighting diseases, medical devices, healthcare systems and processes. They're all quite a little bit generic, but these are the headlines, in these areas. So I can imagine that almost any area of research in health would be able to be covered and funded within the Horizon Europe programme under this area. And if it's not, it can be covered under European Innovation Council funding if it's at higher development level. So that's great news. And as I've mentioned a few moments ago, there is the third pillar is about connectivity, and this pillar here, the first one, EIC, about upscaling, optimizing technologies. One moment. So the EIC Accelerator, in a bit more detail, the fantastic news is you can get about a 2.5 mil grant support for the development cost, which is a phenomenal amount of money. But this is funded at 70%, so there will be some matched funding required. And you can also seek investment money for the final rolling out of the technology, final development, polishing of the technology, if you like, and optimizing, up to investment money. So this is equity money, up to 15 mil. So this is a phenomenal amount of money. And in terms of the application process, it's open at any time. You can make an application next week, and it's in 2 stages. There is a relatively short application of about 5 questions. You have to do a pitch deck and prepare a video also, short video. And then you get invited to do a step 2, which is much more comprehensive. But essentially doing the step 1 is in effect like a filter, so you don't spend too with these is that any subject goes. So again, health can be covered in here. Hopefully people can hear me. I've just got a signal saying my internet might be a bit weak.
Yeah, there was a few seconds actually. So maybe if you can repeat your last 3 sentences, that would be so.
Yeah.
Actually, perfect. I have an addition to this slide as well, if I may just say something important to the teams, because we're working together. And I just wanted to highlight that many programs actually set it as a requirement that you need to go through the EIC Accelerator to be entitled to further funding within the Commission. So that's just one thing that can be important.
Sure, thank you. So let me just repeat this slide here. So European Innovation Council, they have this open accelerator program where any subject goes. So it's particularly attractive for health funding programs, for example, providing you've done some early stage work, and you can get €2.5 million, which is a massive amount of grants, cash, at 70% funding. But then you can go up to 15 mil for upscaling, optimizing work, but that'll be investment money. So there may be some equity dilution there. But overall, it's a phenomenal amount of support for partners. And there are 2 steps. There is a short application, which you can submit at any time. And then they'll give you a result in about 4 to 6 weeks. And then you can apply for the full application, which is more comprehensive. This is an interesting way to make grant applications, because for the first time, to apply for these specific grants, the process uses artificial intelligence to assess some of the initial work. So the portal is quite a little bit rigid in the sense that it's all interconnected. What you put in one answer will influence the output of another answer, and it becomes quite rigid. So you have to be careful about the input that you provide. But it's flexible, you can change things. But the point I'm trying to say is it's an artificial intelligence template, which is quite interesting. In terms of searching the opportunities, this can be a little bit complex if you're not familiar with EU funding and the EU portal. And I heard somebody say to me once that the EU website has got the most content of any website anywhere in the world. So in terms of content and diversity, and there are many ways you can try and find information. I will share my personal way of trying to navigate through the portal and to search for funding opportunities. So if you've not done this before, I would go into Google and I would type the word participant portal, not Horizon Europe, just participant portal. And your first hit will be the page you can see on the right. You click on that link on the right-hand side, and it'll take you to a page at the bottom. And this is where you can very quickly start to search funding opportunities. And you have an opportunity to put the word grants. You declick the closed. If it's gone, you can't apply for it. You can select your program, Horizon Europe, I've typed in health, and I can see already there's 7 funding opportunities around tackling disease, innovative, sustainable, global, competitive health industry, 5 opportunities, and so on. So you can see a number of live projects that you can apply for very quickly. So with a bit of practice and patience, you will be able to navigate yourself around there quite easily. So just to repeat, go into Google, participant portal, you'll get this page, click on that, and then you get this little, it's essentially a search engine. You have to try it and get familiar with it, but hopefully that is a tip to fast track the funding opportunities. So the accelerator I've spoken about very briefly. In terms of the other funding opportunities, it's similar to previous EU funding programs, but essentially the main application will have 3 sections, and this was the same in Horizon Europe. Question 1, section 1, if you like, is around, they use the word excellence. But essentially, that is the quality of the idea, the innovation, the science, the clever R&D bit, describing it, its innovative steps, how it's differentiated. The next main section is about the impact, the commercial impact, the societal impact as well. How are you going to generate revenue from this, the route to market? And for some programs, they actually read impacts before the word, before excellence. So, you know, for some programs, it's the most important section. Other ones, they'll read excellence as a priority. And section 3, using their language, quality and efficiency of the implementation. Essentially, what that means is describing the work packages, the work program. So writing a detailed work program on how the work will be delivered. I won't go into a lot of detail on that because it gets quite in-depth and specific. But I've provided a link here that you can cut and paste, and it'll take you to an application template that you can then use to give you an idea of what you need to do. Okay, hopefully people can still hear me okay. There's also a program called outside of Horizon Europe, but well, on the fringes of Horizon Europe, partly Horizon Europe funding, called Eurostars. Which is again, it's a bit of an upscaling funding opportunities for any technology area, and it's about upscaling. Any discipline goes, and there are 2 cut-off dates every year. In 2022, they're expecting one to be in spring and one in the autumn, and that is the latest information from the EU that I received yesterday. So it's not live today, but if this is something that you want to consider, the key characteristics are on the next slide. Project cost can be £500,000 to £1.5 million. Funding rates about 50 to 60%. It's got to be innovative. It's got to be led by an SME. We have to work with at least 2 entities, independent of each other. And at least one entity needs to be in another country. Yeah, these are a great way of upscaling and optimizing projects in any area of science. So if this is a high level of potential interest, go to the links I provided, and you'll be able to work it out. Yeah. So in the last sort of half an hour, I've given a very high-level overview of the funding landscape and where to go about getting more information. It's giving you a flavour. Now, each of these areas has a specific EU contact, specialist contact, to give you the very detailed information about the funding programme. I can only give you a high-level overview of, you know, within context of this webinar. But I just want to share with you the information that actually you probably can't get off the internet as easy as you can maybe the funding opportunities. So I'll share with you some tricks of the trade and some ideas what might be help to create a very compelling grant application. Okay. I'll just take a pause. First of all, I want to say there is a process to writing grant applications. Of course, we have to read the questions and we have to answer the questions. But to be successful, you have to go beyond the questions. This is what I'm saying. And there is a process. And in my world and in the bid writing, grant writing world, I use the word logic train. There's a logic process to winning the grants that goes well beyond answering the questions. Often the questions in the application may not always be coherent in terms of logical structure. And you know, it's my job, you know, as a bid writer, to make sure that the information is given in a compelling way. Ultimately, the application is a sales document. It is not a scientific article or paper, to be clear. It's more about, I use the word storytelling. We're telling the story, and the one and only objective is to use that application to win the funding for your project. Okay, so there is a process. But of course, and good ideas, good project ideas, start off with great ideas. If I ask anybody what will make a good application, always the answer is, well, of course, it's a great idea. But actually, it goes a little bit beyond that. There's actually a more fundamental step. And when I talk to clients and I'm talking about their project, almost all the time, they're very enthusiastic about their clever science and the innovation and the technical risks, and that's great. I always try and go back a step, and there's 4 fundamental questions which I'll summarize at the end to do a due diligence on what makes a good project concept. And it's not, the starting point is not the clever idea. So the first question I ask is, what is the problem? What is the pain statement? So if a client says to me that, look, there's a lot of people dying because of this disease and there's no technology out there that can help cure them, I'm already excited about a great idea because there's a big problem statement. The second question I ask is, why has nobody solved that problem today? What are the limitations of state of the art? Why, if it's such a big problem, why has nobody solved it today? Why are the technologies out there in the market not good enough? They might be too expensive, they haven't done the clever R&D to fix the problem, or they may not have even come up with the idea. Yeah, it just needs radical new science. The third question I then ask is then the solution, which is the concept. And within that, there has to be a fair degree of technical risk. Risk is good for accessing grant funding. Again, sometimes when I talk to commercial companies, they think, actually, my project is actually quite low risk, and that's more attractive to the funders. Actually, the reverse is true. If the project idea is too safe to deliver technically, the funders may say, well, you don't need a grant. You can go and get the money from investors or a bank loan because you've told me you've got a great idea, it's low risk, the impact is big, so you don't need a grant. You go and get a loan or go and get an investment. And the pitch has to be almost different and say, look, the bank says no, the investors say no, this is too early stage, this is too high risk. The only way I can do this work is through grant funding. That is the sort of general answer that we should be looking to perceive in most EU bids. So high risk, medium to high risk is good, because with high risk, you get high reward, low risk, low reward. And again, high risk, high impact as well. So risk is good. And then the fourth question I ask is, if we can develop this technology and this product, what are the benefits? Economically, socially, environmentally, anything else, politically? Does it impact on standards? So we want to see a number of big impacts coming out of the project on success.
Can I ask a question here? Maybe it is relevant for the others as well. So a question is like, regarding to the fourth question. So actually in the problem statement, actually in the solution statement, do we need to highlight the benefits? I mean, when we are talking about Horizon Europe or Horizon 2020, like, do we need to highlight specifically that, okay, this is the way how we are going to create value to the European Union itself and the European people, citizens, taxpayers?
Yes.
Okay, so it's necessary, actually, so it's an important point.
It is, because that leads to impact, yes.
So
with all these, and thank you for the question. So with all these things, again, another tip when we come to write applications, data is good, and quantifying it and referencing it. Coming out with bold statements like there is a problem, but you're not quantifying how many people and how many people are dying from this disease, it becomes generic and it loses credibility. So being sharp with smart data, accurate data, it adds credibility, because again, I'm just looking around the bid writing world, my world, you almost have to write not to win, but actually not to lose. And what I mean by that is, it's better to write defensively. And again, to expand on that further, when I write a grant application, I'm thinking in my mind, I do not want to give the assessor a single excuse to find a weakness in my application. So it's good to write defensive. And I try and write with the objective, I'm going to write this application to take away any potential objectives from the assessors. So take away any potential weaknesses. So you write defensive as opposed to attacking, if I can put it in maybe the context of a football match. We write defensive. Okay. So I mentioned about a process, and then I mentioned about a need. Now that need needs to be significant. And to give you ballpark figures, for every €1 million that we're seeking in project funding, unwritten rule, you're not going to find this on Google, we should be looking at least 100 mil addressable market. It's less attractive if the market size for your problem is 10 mil and I'm asking for 1 mil, when another project is saying, look, my market problem is valued at 1 billion, and I'm asking for 1 million, then they're going to fund the bigger market, of course, because it's going to create a bigger impact. So, so a big market and a big problem is better than a small market and a small problem. It's more attractive to funders. And if sometimes a client may have, well, actually my market is quite niche, then the way I try and overcome that when I work with people is to say, well, think now, let's see whether we can widen the scope of the application. So we can bring in maybe an additional markets that you might not have considered. And we either combine it or we focus on the same R&D, but maybe focus on a bigger market. So we want a worthy need, a big need, and we want a clever idea to address it. And the two, of course, need to be connected. I'm using terminology here a little bit. A lot of applications are written in a way that I use the terminology technology push. I've got a great idea and I'm going to push it into the market without doing any real market testing, validation with potential end user customers validating that need. Applications can often be stronger if we can validate the technology and market need in the application. So when we develop a grant application, it's often good to work with a customer. Now that a user of that technology, they're not really concerned about getting intellectual property, IP, or ownership or revenues from the project. They've got a problem and they want to solve their problem. And having them on your team validates that market pull and need. So it's often better to work with a partnership where you're working with a customer and a supply chain delivery partnership as well. Okay. Right, the next slide is going into a little bit of detail, nitty-gritty detail about how to construct a proposal, but at high level, not the detail. So I mentioned that the best projects start off with a big pain statement, a big unmet need. That goes fundamentally. If somebody talks to me about a big problem for their project, I'm already excited about trying to find the solution. If they're talking to me about clever science, I'm thinking, so what? And it's trying to take away that so what response. So big problem statement first. But you can't just do it. It has to be hard, but we can't do this project to address this unmet need because there are a number of technical risky barriers. And that is a good thing, not a bad thing, as I mentioned earlier. But we're going to develop some smart objectives in our work program on how we're going to overcome these technical barriers to address this unmet need that is into the work program. So we're going to describe how we're going to do it. And out of that will be deliverables and milestones. So a deliverable from a work package will be developing a clever sensor or a health device. It'll be something often physical or it'll be a bit of software, but it's an output, a tangible output from the work. And milestones tend to be stage gated go, no go decision points. And all of those need to be connected. And as a seasoned grant applicant and assessor, I would suggest a really good way to see whether your project is aligned and constructed well is to actually read it backwards in reverse. So if, for example, if I was to look at the milestones, okay, so this is a success criteria, and these are the deliverables coming out of the project. I want to know how you've made it. And that'll be in the work packages. And if I'm looking at the work packages, well, I want to know what the objectives of the work packages are, and that'll be in the smart objectives. And they should be addressing technical barriers to address an unmet need. And this is such a fundamental point. It might not be easy to articulate it in just a few moments on this one slide, but having that connectivity is fundamental to a well-structured application. It's very often, there'll be a lot of bids are written without this good connection. They'll come up with a problem statement, and then they'll come up with unrelated work barriers and objectives, and the work packages and the objectives and the unmet need are disconnected. So they're trying to solve something which doesn't solve the problem, and the deliverables and milestones don't match up either. And that is really common. So as I said, to summarize, my acid test is if I'm doing a real proofread of an application, I'll try and read it even backwards like this. This is in the bid writing world, we often use this language, technology readiness level. I don't know whether people are familiar with this, but essentially the EU have come up with a good definition of where you are on your R&D path. Essentially, technology readiness level, TRL1, is essentially like an outline project idea, an idea on a bit of paper. It's a sketch. And number 9 is the finished product in the article that you can buy commercially off the shelves today. And you have all these different R&D steps in the middle. And you can get funding for each of these stages from the EU. Now, the very early stage work, TRL 2 to 4, they tend to be more academic, research orientated. Not exclusivity, but normally. And the higher TRL numbers tend to be more industry focused, where they're looking to fund businesses trying to take forward their fundamental science that they've established at early stage and taking it to the next level. So that's really great news. But this is a language, if you get involved in bigger IT, you will need to become familiar with. What is your TRL starting point? And what is your TRL endpoint? Again, I'm just going to go on where some applications go a little bit weak. A lot of bits are written maybe like a scientific journal. But if you want to make an impact, which is what Horizon Europe is mainly about, then it's got to be commercially focused too. And again, a lot of bits are written with very long sentences. It's dry text, and the assessors look at it and they're scratching their heads. Oh no, I've got to analyze and make sense of each of these, sentences. When you write, assume the assessor is an expert generalist. Work on that basis. Don't assume he is the world-beating expert in your science area. Most evaluators are likely to be expert generalists. So write on that basis. So if you're writing something that you feel anybody in my area should know, or at least explain it once, and then don't use too many acronyms or use acronyms. Explain it from the first principles, and then you can keep it at that level. But then just dive in at a very scientific level without explaining, at least at the beginning, of what the science is about. So don't go too heavy on the science. This is not a scientific paper that in a grant application. It's about impact. Try and keep it short, snappy, bullet points, put lots of photographs, give results of what you've done so far, give photographs, pictures. It's always the case that pictures tell much more than long, dry text, and make it look appealing as well. As I said earlier on, it's a sales document. Yeah. Don't waffle. If the information that you're adding is not adding value to the application, and you've got maybe a 1,000-word limit and you're at 800 words, don't pad it out with waffle, because that'll just dilute what you've done. Better to keep it short and snappy. Sometimes, if there is a 30-page or 80-page limit to an application, sometimes people think, the 80-page limit is actually an 80-page target. It isn't. It isn't. It's a limit. So if you end up doing 65 pages instead of a limit of 80, don't think of that as a weakness. More importantly, it's what is the content within the application. But it is a story, and try and tell it as a story. And you almost have to take an evaluator on a bit of an emotional journey where there is a problem. And the evaluator wants to help you, but you've got to help him by giving him the right ammunition to do that. We have to say there is a problem, we can't solve it, but if you fund our project, we can make this real impact, to our business, to our organization, and to society, in a wider way. But in terms of how you want to take this forward individually now, it starts with motivation. Nobody can get you motivated to write a grant application. But if you want to make a difference to yourselves in your careers and your organizations, it starts off with motivation. You've got to want to do this. You write the application, it gets reviewed, it gets revised, and then we submit it. Most commonly, when I've worked in universities with academics, they'll often write it and they'll say to me, this is in previous work and life, can you read the application that I've got as a draft? And it's at this stage, after box number 3. I will do that, but often the value is lost because the biggest impact is actually at the start, before you even start the process. But typically, this is when people ask for help, because if they've written, 70% of the application, 80, 90% of the application, I'm not going to say start again from the beginning, because often it's just before a deadline, there's a few days left, and it's not practical. But the most input is actually at design stage. That's where bid writers want to influence the shape of the bid from the beginning. If people want to do it and you're doing it as part of a team, evolve that team and support from the beginning, not near the end. The earlier, the better. And then what tends to happen, again, I'm talking a little bit from a personal experience, is that when I write a grant application and I've gone through it all and I read it back, it's often disjointed, not clear, not joined well together. All the things that I said shouldn't happen, it tends to happen. But then what happens is we go through a review process, and it goes through almost like a process where we do about maybe 3 or 4 or 5 reviews, where the next iteration of the application, we smooth it out. We iron out those inconsistencies and errors and weaknesses. And then we put it through another review process, and we make further additions. And we get to a point after about 3 or 4, between 3 and 5 edits, where parties will often agree, look, we've refined it now. We can't think of how we can enhance it any further. And at that stage, that's often a good point to conclude, where I can't take this any further. It's as best as I can write it. That's the point you can then and should submit an application. And by the way, what I've just said here and everything about the bid writing process, it's actually irrelevant of the type of grant you're going for. The logic applies. Start off with the pain statements, the limitations of state of the art, the clever idea, and the benefits. That's true in any grant application. Yeah. I'm just summarizing now. This is what it's all about. This is essentially coming to the end of my presentation. If you take nothing away from the last hour, take away these 4 questions and use that as a basis and the due diligence to structure your grant application. Now, I'm trying to do something, quite very wide and quite complex, but each of these funding opportunities that I've spoke about so far will have specialists in those specific funding areas. And I've also been involved in delivering masterclasses for bid writing, particularly to academia, where we run a course over 6 weeks going into very specific areas. So all I can do in this section is give a very high-level overview of the main points to give you a starter. But as I said in a few slides ago, the starting point on your side is motivation. Do I want to do this? If you do, then there is help through this forum. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I was wondering, maybe you guys have any question? Maybe Sergey, because we talked about grants last time on our session. And also, actually received a text from Marcin. He was super excited about grants, but he couldn't make it today. But yeah, guys, if you have any questions, you can just unmute yourself and then feel free to do it, because as I said, that's a big opportunity. You can ask questions now. Otherwise, I have one, if you don't mind. So can I ask, because you said you're also an evaluator. So how does the evaluation process work? So basically, is it only one person, or there are other people? I mean, you do it as a group, or is it just one person per application? How does it look like?
Yeah, great question again. Thank you. So it'll vary a little bit, and depending on the type on the funding program, but typically it'll be assessed by 5 evaluators. You know, it might be sometimes 3, but often it could be 5 evaluators, and they are independent of each other. They'll often do it remotely. Again, I'm just sharing tips. Sometimes these evaluators are, you know, very busy. You want to make reading the application easy for them, and this is why it's not good to use acronyms. But there are 5 evaluators, and they should be well. They are often a mix of maybe industry people, consultants, business people. There are a pool of people that the funding bodies will allocate the application to, because it should be in their general field of expertise. And they will then write their comments and then and their scores, and then it'll go to the funding body, and then a team will then review it, but then try and combine it and summarize it, and then there'll be like an average score that feeds back to the applicant. So often you'll see an average score, and it's quite common, and maybe it's frustrating sometimes. You'll see maybe 4 evaluators thinking, this is such a fantastic idea, I just, you know, this should be funded. And on the other side, there may be a situation where one assessor actually really thinks this is such a bad idea. Now, people might think, well, the 4 people must be right and the 1 person might be wrong. However, you have to be cautious, or we have to be cautious, because the 4 people that said this is a fantastic idea might be generalists, and the 1 person that really beat up the idea might be the leading expert that knows more than the other 4. So the assessors will look at it and do a detailed analysis of it and make their own judgment. It'll go in effect to often like a panel, but it's quite common to see differentiation between feedback. You know, so you have to try and convince and influence everybody, but of course you can't control that. You can only try and influence it. I often say there are 3 things to winning a grant application, and that they're probably in equal measures. Of course, you need a fantastic idea with an unmet need. Of course, you need a great concept. Secondly, you need to write it excellently. It sounds obvious, but it wouldn't surprise me that often a really well-written bid with an average idea may do better than an average idea, than a good idea written in an average way. So the quality of the writing is so fundamental. So you want a great project concept, number 1. Number 2, we need to write it excellently. I mentioned it's a sales document, this application. And then number 3, that we can't control, but we can influence. It's down to the subjective nature of the assessors that we can influence.
I agree. So, exactly, that's the same when it comes to like pitching and sales as well. Yes. That's actually a sales document. And on that note, I just want to say to everyone, like, if you need a good grant writer, Tony is here for you to help. We will distribute this video as well to, I mean, we will upload it to YouTube, plus we will send it to other teams as well who couldn't make it today. And before we close the session, for the last time, I just wanted to ask whether anyone has any question. Everyone is shy today. All right. Then thank you very much, Tony, for this great presentation. And yeah, I wish everyone a very good weekend, and see you guys next week.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and have a good weekend, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.